Hey, everybody. How are you on this Wednesday? We are back again for another episode of Thinking Out Loud with me, Marissa Alexander. So, today we will be discussing our very, very trivial and difficult to understand self defense laws. And I think it's important that we do that because of everything that's going on. But before we get into it, we're going to allow people to join. And y'all let me know how you feel. I'm going to be honest. I'm just a tad bit tired, just a little bit. But I think it's probably because of all the things that I've been looking up and just all the things that I'm learning. And as exhausted as I've been with just looking at all of the information, it's got to be even more difficult for people trying to interpret when is a good time or when is it correct to actually apply self-defense, if you will. And I think what we have to be honest about is when there is an imminent threat, no one, and I mean absolutely no one, is going through the legal ramifications of what could take place in the event it's imminent at that moment. I also think that there's times where you can foresee not putting yourself in a situation, but nonetheless, I don't believe that whenever there's an issue where we are thinking about, oh shoot, is it me or you, that or the threat is just completely startling, that you're like, you know what? Is this castle doctrine? Do I have a right? Do they need, I mean, can I shoot them once they turn their back? Should I wait until they grab some stuff and are heading out? Should I wait till they charge at me? Should I get punched in the face first? Or, I mean, that's just not happening. And I think it's unrealistic for us to not necessarily, discuss that, but also not allow for people to set the expectation that is in fact a realistic expectation. And so one of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight is just kind of the progression in which self-defense has taken, and what that looks like for us, for those of us who are what you call lawful gun owners, and may not necessarily be concealed to carry it outside the home, but you absolutely have the right to have that protection within your home, unless you're in certain states where you have someone who is has a prior felony and they have not had their rights restored. And in states in my hometown like Florida, then you are not to be around firearms, which is a whole nother show. But how y'all doing out there? Okay, so this was kind of sparked from, well, it wasn't kind of sparked, it was from Diamonds Ford here in Jacksonville, Florida, in my hometown, and her, case that she's currently fighting, where she was a part of a raid that took place in her home, and she unfortunately is facing jail time at this point. Now, the issue really has been about, what is when is it lawful to protect yourself in? And I think that it's even weird that we have to have that conversation in terms of it being in your own home. But I posted a question earlier. I think it was yesterday, when I asked my Facebook friends if the situation was just as simple as you're in a bed, you sleep, you're startled by glass shattering, and you hear noise, you waking up out of your sleep. What's your next move? And I would say about 85% of you guys said that y'all are asking questions later. You first shooting and asking questions later. That was majority of you all's responses. And I would also go as far to say that would be most people's response to that. And we also had a few people who were prior law enforcement officers, or maybe some security people, maybe some people who had some experience with that. And their answer was kind of, okay, grab my weapon, assess the situation, so to speak, but get my family clear. Or better yet, grab my weapon and get next to my family or my children. And then, if I need to shoot, then shoot. And I don't know. I think it's one of those things where if it depends on whether or not when it actually happens, what you will actually do. Because it's one of those things where you always be like, well, if it was me, y'all know the story. What I would have did. You don't know until you actually experienced it. You can have an idea in your mind what it might look like based off of the story that you hear about somebody else's situation, but you're not necessarily going to know what you're going to do when it in fact happens. It doesn't work like that. We're not wired in that way. We have some level of understanding what that fear might happen, like what we would feel, but the steps and how it would play out, it's really going to be like instinct kicking in. And in those times, I'm thinking the best, or the thing you're thinking is survival. That's it. Like you're not thinking about, like I said, the legal ramifications. So, this particular case with this young lady got me to thinking, because we also think about baby girl Breonna Taylor, and the fact that she was just sleeping in her home, her and her boyfriend, and that they were subject to a no-knock warrant. Now, in my hometown of Florida, it is not called a no-knock warrant. It is called a high-risk warrant, which I think is kind of misleading, but nonetheless, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And so they obviously, the story. If you don't, you pretty got to know it by now. And Breonna was unfortunately killed, and her boyfriend heard it, and he went to fire back in self-defense. He, in fact, did shoot an officer in the thigh. Luckily for him, he did not get murdered, but he was charged with attempted murder on a law enforcement officer. Since then, his charges have been dropped, but I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news lately, but the officer is like now suing or trying to get some type of civil damages from Breonna Taylor's, boyfriend. And I hate to call him her boyfriend, but that's the gentleman, and y'all can look his name up. So, here she is, gone. He done lost her. The mama done lost their baby. His girlfriend gone. The community is suffering, the world is. And now the officer's like, you know what? I know I signed up for SWAT, but I didn't think it was going to happen like that. Can I get some civil damages? I don't understand it. Y'all make it make sense, because it don't make sense to me. That's like me going to war and being like, you know what, United States government, they was popping off at me and they shot me and I came back over here and I don't want just benefits and care. I'm gonna need to go ahead and sue y'all because I went over there and I did not think war was gonna be like that. I'm just saying. I know I'm being, facetious right now, but that's my thinking. That's my mind. So let's just talk about the self-defense. Okay, so do you all know that the self-defense and castle doctrine came from a terminology called make my day? Doesn't that sound so, I don't know, Clint Eastwoodish, Westernish, like gunslingingish? That's the South, but nonetheless, that's where it comes from. So Florida is one of those states, in addition to like Alabama, Texas, South Dakota, South Carolina, that has some very, I would say, strong castle doctrine, laws. Now, we don't necessarily call it castle doctrine, but the idea is that your castle is your domain, and you are, over it, and you can protect it. And so much so that you can protect that or anything in it, your property or anyone else that's in the home. And so, there had been instances where people had to, do self-defense outside of the home. And there was different situations, say, for instance, like, somebody was trying to carjack somebody, or there was, an issue where they were trying to, harm somebody who their property would be their car, or them trying to steal something in their car, and this person protected their property. And it wasn't necessarily in their home or in their space. It was outside of that. So then you have an expansion of self-defense that then allows for that to take place. Now, here's the thing. Because there's been so much expansion on self-defense, we then come into 2005 here in Florida. Other states will maybe just a little bit sooner, but then a lot of states after Florida, where we established the stand your ground, which is just basically, in a nutshell, an expansion beyond your house, and it gives you an even more, I would say, stronger case for self-defense, because it says that if you presumably are in a situation where you are reasonable, or a reasonable person, maybe not even just you, just a reasonable person, that there is a threat that you could, in an imminent threat, meaning immediate at that moment, could cause great bodily harm or injury, then you don't have a duty to retreat. And that you can, at that point, ward off an attack, if you will, because reasonably you believe that that immediate threat could cause you harm or death. And so what that does is it just makes it one of those things where it's subjective to your personal experience. To me, that's basically what I have seen so far. I see y'all saying a few things. Let me check y'all out. Right. So basically we've had the situation that has happened in Chicago, and I believe Brian mentioned that, where he's talking about the lady, and this is a 2-year-old case. This is what's tripping me out, right? This is a 2-year-old case. So the lady, she was just a subject of the wrong place. They just had, first of all, the warrant wasn't even signed. And then on top of that, they completely in the wrong place. And she is completely unclothed. She's in her birthday suit, and they just ransacked her place, handcuffed her, and was like, yeah, why you sitting there with your lady parts dangling in the cold? We're going to go ahead and search this, this whole apartment. And, at some point, we're going to give you a jacket and tell you to relax. Listen, that 8-minute video will make you, I'm going to go back to being civilized. So like Brian said, we also have that as well. But that was 2 years ago. So where we are now is we've had several incidents of these raids of these no-knock warrants, and we've had or high-risk warrants where there isn't any body cam footage. And it kind of makes you think. Let me ask y'all this. What exactly do you think about 2 years ago in Chicago? They had this body cam footage that is very clear that they messed up. Like, it is super clear. And now we're seeing incidents where there isn't any body cam footage. And I don't know if that's, like an internal hidden practice that they're not saying, hey, we do a raid, we ain't doing no body cam footage. Or if it's just a mistake. I doubt to say that, but that particular raid gave you a lot of insight into what was done wrong, just the complete negligence of the Chicago Police Department, the fact that they were not only inadequate in doing the raid properly, they were just dumb. They just were they didn't check their stuff first. And the person they were looking for was actually in the building in another apartment on ankle monitor, which makes that even worse, but here we go. Now, had Miss Lady, been in there and she's naked, in her room, and they bust in, and her first thing is to grab her piece. Look how bad that could have happened. Look, that situation could be, a situation where, there was a lot of gunfire and she could be, killed. A law enforcement officer could be hurt. And here we are, you know what I mean? And it's a whole completely wrong identity, wrong person, wrong, apartment. Your warrant's not signed, so you didn't do any checks, anything like that. But that's kind of where you are. But so going back to stand your ground. So stand your ground says that you can use deadly force, such as shooting someone to defend yourself if you fear for your life or afraid of serious bodily injury. And so in Florida and other states, there is no duty to retreat before using deadly force. Here's the thing, y'all, that whole statute, there's quite a few of them. So you have to read down into it. And I think what makes it so convoluted is because there's several different stipulations, you know what I mean, that go under it. So it goes castle doctrine, self-defense, and then there's like, and then there's like 776.013, 12, and 14. And then all of that goes down into breaking down other things. And I think as a layperson, somebody who doesn't study the law, who doesn't have a juris degree, if it's difficult to even look through that in terms of jury instruction, when you tell a juror, hey, like, this is how you figure that out, And if we know for sure that law enforcement has a problem with even determining when that's accurate and when it's not, as we saw with Trayvon Martin, when he was initially given the basically, oh, hey, you stand your ground type of thing. Same thing in Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery. This is their story against his, hey, we didn't have a choice, even though we ran him down. And this is what we had to do. And if you haven't seen any of the video footage, they were, quite, I don't know, accommodating to him, that, hey, it's okay, relax, take a breath, all of that stuff that we Black people in our communities do not get that. And I'm not even going to make this about a color issue, but that's apparently there, right? And so that is what took place in Georgia as well. So this is just one of those things where people who are in that line of work don't necessarily have the acumen that they need to have in order to determine on the scene whether or not it is in fact truly stand your ground cases. And honestly, when you have a situation like we had with Ahmaud Arbery, where there's months later, and you have more evidence coming forward, like video footage and statements and things like that, that is one of the main reasons why I have such an issue with it being ruled as stand your ground at the scene of the actual incident, because there's too much information that it needs to be collected in terms of investigation that is not being considered. So, that is actually, also, yes, right, Joey Williams. I'm just put it on up here for y'all. Free diamonds for it all day. So what you said, Brian? Okay. So that is basically, that situation with Ahmaud Arbery. So let me tell you where I did some research and I found this to be interesting. And I want you all to really I'll put some links in here for you to go check it out. But this is not even something that I've known as much as I've, covered stand your ground and understand, all of the different things. And when I say covered it, I just keep researching it. I've been researching it, y'all, and since I was in jail in 2011. That's just how long I've been, and it's 2020. So, I consider myself as expert. I do, that's just how I feel, claiming it. And so I've been collecting cases, and then also I worked on my own defense. In my case, when I got my appeal overturned, I knew exactly what was going on with the appeal, why we were doing it the way we were doing it, what was the issue with the jury instructions, why it was understood the way that it was, the need for it to be overturned, the reasons why, and here we were moving forward. So I just really, I don't know, I guess I'm just passionate about being able to be told that there's a law, but we don't think it works for you. So we're going to change our discretion on how we understand it and how we apply it so that it doesn't apply to you and not have an issue with that. So here are some reasons why the presumption of reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm does not apply. You ready? It will not apply if the person against whom the defense force is used has the right to be in the home or vehicle. So say, for instance, in a situation where a person is in your home and, you decided you want to do it. What they're not saying is that whether or not you're being attacked. This is not stating that, but this is one of the reasons why they may decide that it does not apply to you, because you're standing your ground in a place that you're saying that somebody else doesn't have the right to be, when in fact they actually do. Okay. And that's notwithstanding whether or not there was a threat or anything at that particular time. That's just that verbiage. Another thing, and this is in the law itself, the person or persons sought to be removed is a child or a grandchild or is otherwise in lawful custody under the lawful guardianship of the person against whom the defense force is used. So you can't be out here trying to shoot at your children. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Or your please don't do that. And they should, in fact, be in your home. Now, I've heard of situations where kids come there and you ain't supposed to be here, and there'd be some scuffle going on. And, I don't know how that would look, but I guess if maybe they're 18 and they're not supposed to be there, I don't know. But these are things that you might want to familiarize yourself with so that you're not caught up in a situation where, you get downtown and they lock you up, give you bologna sandwiches. Just saying. Been there, done that. Got a t-shirt and a hat. So then the other one is the person who uses defense force is engaged in unlawful activity, or is using the home or vehicle to further an unlawful activity. So let me tell you how this works. This is one of those things where, and we have had cases in my home state of Florida, okay, where you are literally in an incident where y'all doing a drug deal. Somebody decides, you know what, I don't have the money, I want to rob you. So then the person who's there doing this drug deal, who is like, you finna rob me for this money, and then they harm the other person or kill them. And they literally have been able to use stand your ground to get off on it. Now, this is the crazy thing about it. This is clearly saying that the activity for which you therefore in that space, you couldn't be in an unlawful activity. Now, unlawful activity is a range of different things, but specifically they mention felonies. So they're talking about attempting to commit or committing or forcible felony of some sort, or violent felony, including treason, murder, kidnapping, manslaughter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all that. You can't be robbing somebody. You can't be home invasion, stalking, aggravated assault. You can't do any of those things. So this right here is stating, if you are in fact in the middle of committing a crime and then somebody starts to like beat you up and then you shoot them, you technically can't use it because you were in the commission of a felony. You were in the commission of an unlawful act. So that is what that is saying. Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. Plain Jim Crow laws. Yes. And then guess what, y'all? Every time you talk about, let me put this up here because I think this is important. I'm a segue into this. Every time we talk about we need to reform, what do you think is happening? What do you think is happening when we keep talking about let's reform? All we're doing is taking the same laws and re-switching them. And then what they do is they figure out a way to then wiggle out of that. Hence, you know what? Let me stack all of the federal courts with people who haven't even literally wrote a brief, let alone actually like argued a case at trial. Because at some point, if we can decide how the laws are interpreted, right, and how we're going to decide who gets what in at this level, then we can pretty much, shift how and who we apply the law to, because at the bench level, at the court level, I got to be respected. And if it goes to my homie above me, the appellate court, well, guess what? We done stacked it up there too. So it'll be fine. I'm just saying it's something to consider when you start thinking about laws and different things like that. And we keep saying we need a law for that, and we keep needing the law for that. Well, you can't legislate morality. You can't change people's consciences. That's something they're going to want to do. You can't rip out complicit biases and racism. You cannot do it. And when you're dealing with an antiquated system that we have, I say you're going to catch hell trying to reform things that are deeply rooted and antiquated. It is difficult. So that's just my thoughts on that. So then the last one, which is very important. Again, we're talking about the presumption of reasonable fear and imminent death and great bodily harm, where it does not apply, meaning that the presumption of reasonable, for you to justify self-defense, stand your ground, this is where it's not applicable. The last one is the person against whom defense force is used is a law enforcement officer who enters or attempts to enter the home or the vehicle in the performance of his or her official duties, and the officer properly identified himself or herself or the person should have known that it was a police officer. Okay, so let's talk about that. You sleep, you in your home, you not sleep. Let's just say you're sitting in your house and you're on a sofa eating ice cream, and you bust up in my place, and you know what I mean? What if I'm sitting there with my piece? You want me to assess it and be like, oh, that's the law enforcement. Okay, let's go on to the next situation. Obviously, Breonna Taylor, you are in your sleep, you ramming at my door, and I'm like, hey, if you need to ram at my door, that means you're not supposed to be in there because you would not or just say, hey, ring the doorbell, right? Hence, no knock. So the idea of the no knock is just basically to do a forced entry that will prevent you anytime from being able to protect yourself, or basically get rid of the thing that they actually were coming in there to get, like stole drugs, throw it away, or things like that. So the idea is to kind of catch you off guard, because I don't want you to destroy any evidence or get away or anything like that. That's really the purpose. But what we are seeing is not only are people, obviously defending themselves, which I believe you absolutely have the right to be able to be like, hey, something has happened and let me protect myself. I think that's just, in our DNA, we're wired to that way. But also to consider, am I supposed to wait and be like, oh, that's police officers, and by y'all, I get hurt? Or what if it's not a police officer? And now to assess this situation, and hey, you done got me, beat me down, got me somewhere. And I mean, like, what are you supposed to do? I'm not trained like tactical, but I just know that in times of survival, I'm not thinking, you know what I mean? Let me make sure this ain't, this is not the law. Right. And I think that honestly, I think that's not a reasonable expectation. And I think that not only that, at a bare minimum, you don't even have body cam footage that you ran into these raids to even say, oh, the person was caught off guard. They was asleep. They broke. I mean, you don't have any of that evidence. So it's just a matter of going against your word and our, the officers or the enforcement word, and the person that the house is being raided. Unless you have situations like the lady in Chicago where you got a full video of them just botching that completely up. And so where does that leave us? And I think that's something we need to consider, because I can just remember hearing all of the old OG rap songs, and everybody was like, listen, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried out by 6. And some of us was raised like that. Some of us was like, listen, I'm gonna get you before you get me. I think that it's just a matter of survival. And I'm talking about situations where you are caught off guard, you got to defend yourself, or better yet, especially when you just have to, maybe you're not caught off guard. I think it's people's natural instinct to be, we're talking about, what's the term I want to use? You're talking about adrenaline. I think they're using the term superhuman strength right now. Y'all be careful of that narrative, but what it is just basically your adrenaline. And so, those are just things. No, it's not going to work. My good friend and mentor says it's not going to work. It's not. And because we've continued to be on a slippery slope with self-defense, what it is considered, how do you interpret it? Who is it for? Who is it not for? Also, how far can you go? Who gets to decide how to interpret it? And when in fact you can use it, you can't use it against somebody who just might happen to be in law enforcement, even though you wouldn't know that. So some kind of way you're supposed to determine inside of your home and in your safe space that whoever on the other side of that door is in fact a raid, because, I guess you're supposed to believe that you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. And therefore to expect that, I have no idea, y'all. I don't necessarily have the answers, but I will tell you this. I'm deeply concerned about the message that it sends. And I think you should be too, because what we are seeing is really a level of unlawful militarism that's taking place at the hands of paid public servants. And it's at the expense of, the people who pay for the salaries. Now, we're not going to sit up here and say that they are all, the whole aim is that, where some of people would argue that, and that's another conversation. But I think you have to look at what it looks like in other countries when they, commit this level of, violence and state violence and military type deployment. And it's always specifically on communities of color and specifically Black communities. And so we're left with this media in front of us, okay, and it looks like something you would see in a third world country. And what I'm saying to you is that image, that experience is traumatic. Continuing to see those images is traumatic, but also what it does is it desensitizes us to believing that that's somewhat normal. And it's not normal. And what I'm saying is it can't be okay. And we have to hold our people accountable that it's not okay. So in terms of my sheriff in my hometown, Sheriff Williams, that's not okay. It's not okay that you got over half of the budget and you all didn't have body cam footage when you went into this young woman's home. It's not okay. It's not okay, City Council, that you gave them the money when they haven't solved a lot of the crime and the issues. And then you didn't decriminalize marijuana when you had the chance. And see, this is where we have to hold these people accountable. But we got to make sure that we are, we're understanding what's going on. So for me, I'm just going to put the links, and I'm going to tell you, outside of Florida, there's about 33 other states that have some very strong castle doctrine, stand your ground laws. And because this slippery slope is continuing to get even slipperier, is that a word? We now have our governor in Florida who said, you know what, I'm going to expand this even further. If you happen to protest and you loot, I want to expand it so that you can just shoot the people that is in your store, or you are in your way when you're on the highway and driving. And see, y'all, that is when things continue to get out of control. So the more that we're educated, then maybe we can determine, how it is that we can, combat that. But what we can't do is be like, oh, it ain't me. Because guess what? It could be. I'd never thought that I would have been in that situation. You couldn't have told me that. I could have went to Madame Moselle with her crystal ball, paid her $20, $50, or $100, and then she'd have told me, I'd be like, girl, you tripping. I'm just saying, we don't want to wait till it's on our doorstep. So if there's an action that we can take, that action would be to get educated. And that action would be to support causes where we see these issues are currently happening and make sure that people in our community are not subject to these things that we know that we wouldn't want to happen to us. So that's all I got. I know I've been preaching to y'all. As you can see, I'm very passionate about this. I believe my mentor always tells me, self-defense or survival is the number one law of the land. Number one, because if it's not you, then what? So we have to protect ourselves. And when we have so many different things coming at us and saying, hey, you can protect yourself, but you know what I mean? When you're in that space, when it happens, when it goes down, that's not the way we're thinking. And the truth of the matter is that's not the way they're thinking either. But you're going to tell me that's the way I should believe when you know good and darn well if it was your home, you wouldn't do that. And so when I'm really saying to y'all, this stuff is just not right. Forget color. Forget the fact that it's a matter of poverty and, economic depravity and things like that. This is wrong. This is just wrong. Just on the black and white of it, it's wrong. And so I'm gonna get off here tonight before I continue on. Y'all, please share, talk to your people, send this out. Make sure you know what you can and can't do as a concealed weapons permit owner. If you don't have insurance, I would suggest that you do get it. And before you get it, shop around and make sure you got the best one. And I'm not talking about life insurance. Well, you need to have that too. But there's also insurance for people who carry concealed weapons permits. That helps you up to bond, with bonding all the way through some of your legal defense, but you have to look it up and see. And, just make sure you know what's going on. And more importantly, when you're outside the home, don't put yourself in situations where you might need to protect yourself. But when you're in your own home, understand what you can and can't do. But I posted about that today, and he basically said, hey, you shouldn't have to worry about all these legalities when your life when you believe that your life is being threatened and your space is being threatened. So more to come later on, y'all. Thank you for joining me. Thank y'all for being patient with me as I give you this information. I will go back in and talk with you all and send some links to some things that I have found You can do your research in your own state. You will find there is a whole gamut of understanding or misunderstanding or a lack of understanding about just self-defense. So that's it. Peace out, y'all.